G'day everyone, welcome to Rule of Reason and my very first interview with, I'm fortunate to have my guest and friend, Dr Daymon Steptoe, the doc, the owner and operator, managing director of the Bush Clinic. He's also in the past been forensic scientist, a doctor, which is where I met you in your walk of life, adventurer, photographer, a man of many talents, and someone that I hold in very high regard, and I'm very thankful that you're here today. Damo.
Arigato, Zach.
Thank you for joining me.
And welcome to my office.
And just for those who are watching this, what an office. This is absolutely stunning piece of the world.
Yeah, it was fairly cheap to set up. It's the only office in the world where you can light a fire on the floor.
Yeah.
and a horse will walk past.
Well, and that's what we're hoping. Don't be distracted. Definitely listen to us, what we have to say. Actually, it's not. What we have to say is not better than the horses. And yeah. But it's going to be good. So we're out in nature, and there's a reason why we're out in nature. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. But I thought what we'd do, just to get the episode started so that people at home can get a bit of context as to who you are. Maybe if you could run us through a little bit about yourself, your career. So you stepped through forensics, you changed to medicine. Now you're not doing medicine. And we'll also touch on the adventures that you had, whether that be in the outback or sailing or whatever you feel you want to touch on. And there's a lot there in that. And then also your photography as well. And then we'll touch on the Bush Clinic and where you are now. How's that sound?
Perfect, matey.
Okay.
So, where do I start with this? Initially, I was studying at UQ, and I got stuck into anatomy. I did a lot of teaching in anatomy. And then I got into a little bit of teaching in dentistry and oral health and things like that. And then teaching medicine. And I guess my background started where the anatomy naturally moved into forensics. And actually I was at the Queensland Museum one day, and I think we talked about this before. I was looking at a T-Rex skeleton. I'd never been to the museum. And I was absolutely blown away that all of the bone structures from head to tail basically correlate to human anatomy. Completely different shape. Okay, we don't have tails, but we do have a coccyx. And all the little nooks and crannies and holes and whatnot for all the muscles, basically exactly the same. And I thought to myself, how can this be? You're like, really? How can this be? And it got me curious, and I ended up walking upstairs to talk to the curator of the museum, an awesome guy called Peter Gessner. And they were working on the Pandora shipwreck. And I had heard from the cleaner downstairs, whilst I'm still there gazing at these bones, they were vacuuming the floor going, get out of here, boy. And I was talking to the cleaner, and he told me a little secret. He said that they'd actually discovered human remains from the Pandora shipwreck during excavation. And they weren't quite sure what to do about this, right? So I strolled upstairs and got a meeting with Peter Gessner. And the next thing I know, I was doing an honours research degree on the bones, which was really fun.
I bet.
Yeah, I mean, that is considered the most significant shipwreck in the Southern Hemisphere, certainly of its era.
Mm.
And there were times when I was there when they cracked open a bottle of spruce, and it filled the room like fresh spruce. And they used to take that with them to get rid of scurvy, because spruce is loaded with vitamin C.
Mm-hmm.
And once they cottoned onto that was causing scurvy, of course they said, let's get a bucket load of these spruce bottles. And it had a cork in it, by the way. So this shipwreck's a couple hundred years, over 200 years underwater, and the cork was even preserved. So I thought to myself, if that cork's preserved, and they found a lump of beef, by the way, preserved in that shipwreck.
What?
And my brain just went, DNA. If that protein's intact, there should be DNA there. And so I guess that's sort of nailed the coffin for me in the forensic career, because we were able to, with the help of scientists at John Tonks Centre Forensic Centre in Brisbane, we were able to extract DNA from those bones, which was a world first, actually. Mm-hmm. And next thing I know, I took a job up in the forensic services in Darwin because it sounded a lot more fun than taking a job in Sydney. And it was just fun. I loved every minute of it. The guys up there are awesome. The staff are fantastic. The police are fantastic up there. You know, they're still very country up in Darwin.
Yeah, I would add to that it is the Wild West and the final frontier as far as Australia is concerned, and that goes for any industry, if you want the best experience you're ever going to get, that's the place to do it.
There were plenty of times where we would be out in Arnhem Land fishing or whatever, and I spent all my time out bush. And the police would drive by, going to see someone do something. We'd just stop and go fishing. You know, like they never did anything wrong, but they were just friendly people, and they were never there ever to stir up anyone. And there's a lot of information in the media. It's a very, very difficult topic with the Aborigines up there. It's complicated. Most people from the city don't understand it. They've just never been there. But I loved it, and I would go out every single weekend, every chance I had, even at night time, and learn about bush tucker and bush medicine, and I just loved it. I loved it, and I guess that's where I truly realised that my heart was in the bush, that's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And your dedication to whatever you set your mind to helps you succeed in everything that you've done so far. We've previously talked about some of the cases that you took in forensics, working with the FBI, helping them with cold cases. You rise to the top of forensics, but it sounds like your experience in forensics in the Northern Territory, and in particular learning a lot of the things that the Indigenous have known for a long time, but also combined with that love of the bush, that you've gone, I want to help people that are alive. You know, forensics, I assume, was a lot of, not always people who had died, but there's certainly the case.
I'll give you an interesting example, which is a little bit morbid. This was actually, there was a TV show made about this somewhere along the line. Somebody was apparently knocked off and buried out bush. The guy's in prison. And eventually he confessed to it. And it was my job to go and find the body. So one of the things I specialised in was finding unmarked graves in massive areas, maybe years and years and years later, right? There's not many people that get into this, but every forensic centre has someone that knows something, and we always work together. So we had to find a body, and the way I did it, so we had a whole bunch of people there. We had snipers sitting up in trees because they were worried the guy might try and do something. He's in his orange jumpsuit going, I went here, I went there, and whatnot. You have to look around and read the country to try and reconstruct the story. And we found it after a couple of days, actually. You know how I found it? The sand where the guy had dug the hole was a slightly different colour. So in the Territory, all the bushfires put charcoal on the top. When you crack through that 1 foot layer, changes colour. And if you dig a hole 5 feet, 4 feet, you're going to mix that colour. And the wasps took advantage of the softer soil that had been disturbed and aerated and made a nest. And for the first time in my life, I followed this wasp and it landed on the ground, right? Normally they're up in the trees, this particular species. And I watched it crawl down into a hole. And then I realised that the sticks that were placed on top of it didn't fall like that. They were like a teepee. And then I saw the next thing, the colour and a bunch of other things. And this is what we call a secondary depression. And that's how we found it. And in that particular case, the guy, as I said, this was made into some kind of TV show somewhere. The guy had burnt the head of the victim so that thinking the cops would never catch him and so on and so forth. And this is crazy. He knocked the top off a termite mound. There's thousands of termite mounds, dug out a hole and put it in there and put the lid back on. And over the next week, the ants fixed it so that you couldn't see it. And we went round everywhere, carefully looking at thousands of termite mounds until we found it. And then it was my job to reconstruct all of that and put it back together. But that's an example of if you didn't get the vibe of the bush, you'd be out there forever. You sort of got to tune into nature, if that makes sense.
Yeah, of course. And all the while, you, in your personal time, were an adventurer. You jump in your cruiser.
I'd much rather any day.
Correct. And so that obviously would have aided your abilities as well.
Yeah, I really think it's about being comfortable in nature. So people that aren't used to camping, for example, it's hard work. You've got to pack all that gear up, get everything organised, drive out there, pack all your tent up, set up your tent up and whatnot. And then it's overnight and you're tired from all that work and they wake up the next morning, pack it all up again, drive all the way home, back to the big smoke, and then unpack it all again and clean it. And to me, that's like 3/4 of your time messing around doing stuff that you hate, like a chore. So I used to just roll the swag out on the ground. That was it for me. And if there were snakes kicking around or ants or something, I'd roll it out on the roof rack, and I'd sleep equally well under the stars. So for me, being comfortable out bush, if you're not thinking of all work and all this drama rattling around in your head, the only thing to soak up is nature itself. Like those crows that you can hear now, I can tell you, they're calling out that we've lit the fire. They're saying, hey, is the barbecue on? Come over here later. There might be some tucker kicking around. Everybody knows. Every creature is communicating, and if people learn to slow, I call it slowing down to the speed of the bush, right? When you slow down to that pace, it's like a different world.
Yeah.
And I love it.
Well, I mean, and as we've already pointed out, for those of you who are watching, I mean, there's a reason why it's nice to be here. It's pretty relaxing.
It's relaxing, yeah.
It's very relaxing.
It's my office.
Yeah. And so, well, let's move towards that. So before we get to the bush clinic, you then move from forensics to medicine, again in the Northern Territory, which is where we met, in Darwin.
Yep.
You somewhat stumbled across the epiphany to do medicine in a similar way to how you stumbled into forensics. Did you want to talk about the transition to medicine and, I guess, your journey in medicine until now?
Yeah, and we spoke about this a while ago, that I was on a trip out in the middle of nowhere in the Kimberleys, and there was a terrible car accident with some of the local Aborigines up there. It was 7 people were lying around in bits and pieces. Well, not bits and pieces, but they were really messed up from a terrible crash. And I was the only one there. Now, I had a really good medical kit. Like, to me, going, bush, make sure you're prepared. Otherwise, it's very embarrassing when something goes wrong. And I had pretty good gear for, a moron off the street. And we got everybody through. We called the RFDS in. We had to even set up the airstrip for them on a neighbouring property. We got them in. Everybody was okay. But I know 3 of those 7 people were borderline touch and go, gonna die. One lady had fluid or blood filling up in her lungs. You can tell the level of fluid. You can probably hear this on the mic. You tap your finger. Hear how that's hollow? If I go down here, different sound. Up, down. So I knew she was filling up at a certain rate, and I'm looking at the watch going, she'll drown soon. Everybody got out okay. Great story, right? I went away thinking, I don't know if I want to dig up dead bodies for the rest of my days and do forensics, as much as I love that job. I just wanted to speak the truth in forensics. And I started thinking about, how about helping the living? Now really, and that launched my medical career. And it was just a case of getting off your butt and having a go, because people have dreams and they don't act on it. They go, oh, I'll never do it. Oh, it's too hard. Do you know what? They never will do it. And for them, it probably is too hard. Exactly correct, right? You just have a go. And I know many people have asked me, how do I get into forensics? How do I get into medicine? And I can tell who's serious and who's not. And many of them failed 2, 3, 4, 5 times. And they're now in those jobs. So it's very difficult to apply in certain forensic positions. You generally get asked. So I would say to somebody, okay, go and do a 1-year research project that's never been done before. I'll help you with it. Something clever, useful. And then you just go to the next international conference and tell everybody. That's how you'll get somebody coming up. They go there and recruit people. They're not silly, right? Medicine's a little bit different. It's just an extremely, insanely difficult exam. And you have to think in so many different modes to get through that exam. You've got to be a lateral thinker. You've got to be good with people. You've got to smell a rat. When someone's got this problem but they're too scared to tell you, you've got to know that they're trying to tell you something and tease it out. It's such you've got to know chemistry. You've got to know blood pressure, physics. It just goes on. And let's not even mention anatomy, right? Human anatomy is really, really complex. And so I think those 2 segues into 2 different areas, and photography is another one. But to me, it's not a bad explanation of how this bush clinic was born, because once you see the beauty of nature, I see it in everything, everywhere. Once you see that, that's like going from working on the dead to working on the living, to me. So doing the things that I've done, loved it. Nothing against anyone that doesn't do what I do or like what I don't care. I couldn't give a rat's. But for me, going back to nature is very, very important, and there are so many answers in nature. Kookaburras are laughing at me.
It's my favourite bird.
They're like, yeah, we've heard this before.
I love kookaburras.
Not when they're up there, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's so many answers, and even in herbal medicine, I'm going to say, there are so many natural solutions, and the whole world's turning their eye to this topic now. This is going to be a very hot topic coming up. There are so many plants that were known to do amazing things, and they've been slowly rattled out of our system, out of our society, because you can't patent a natural substance, right? These guys, let's call them big pharma, whatever, okay? They're legitimate companies. They're pretty keen to make $1, but they don't want you having knowledge where you can grow some benign plant in your backyard and get your source of vitamin C, for example. Like we're talking about that native spinach over there, loaded with vitamin C. They don't want you to know that because they're not going to make any money. Do you see what I mean? That
Of course.
the corporate system starts to collapse a little bit when you turn your attention back to nature.
Well, that might be a good segue to move into the bush clinic. So you feel free to talk about as much or as little as you like in regards to where you're at with medicine now. But let's move into, if you do or don't want to talk about that, once you've done that, move into the bush clinic and what it is, so people listening at home know. I'm sure they're sort of getting a feel for it now with the conversation. And maybe address those things that you're talking about where there's that shift. Would you say maybe a breakdown of trust in the things that we once trusted in, whether it be big pharma or whatever, medicine or whatever the case may be,
That's
and why there might be a turn back to what we used to know?
Yeah, so I'll start off by saying just a handful of weeks ago, I voluntarily deregistered with AHPRA as a doctor. Doesn't mean I'm not a doctor. You just can't practice under those AHPRA rules. And there's this blurry line between federal law and state law and the fact that I earned that degree and I should be able to freely help people, so long as I don't harm anyone or do anything wrong, right? Doctors now, some of them are finding it difficult because they feel that they can't speak their truth. They've gone and done all this work and earned this amazing knowledge, etc., and they really do want to go and help people, but they're not allowed to say certain things. So I can assure you, I know many, many doctors that are leaning towards natural therapies that work. They actually work, right? They're really good, they work. And they get busted. Suddenly they're audited, suddenly they're in trouble, and they have this terrible legal case that stresses the daylights out of them for 1 year or 2 years or something, right? There's a lot of doctors that are fed up with this, right? For me, the bush clinic, this is not a place of medical practice, certainly not now, right? However, what we do is say, look at nature for solutions. So, for example, water is much more important than people realise. There's a reason why virtually every species on the planet dies without water, right? It's very complex, it's very exciting, and there are people around the world starting to think a little bit more about this, right? I got upset because we had toxins that turned up in our spring water here. And had I drunk that water, I'd probably die. In fact, actually, the horses would not drink the water. That's what twigged me onto this. And I thought, there must be a snake kicking around the spring looking for a frog to eat or something, right? They're not silly. They know when there's danger around and they won't go near it. And so I set up a pump. I put a hose down and set up a pump and an old bathtub up there so the horses could drink their water and not stress. One of the small horses went into renal failure because she refused to drink the water. And I'm going, that ain't no snake, right? And the snake won't hang around there. They'll eat and nick off probably. When I was priming the pump, I'm sucking some water out of the dam. And we drink this water, by the way. It's pristine, spring water. We're going to bottle it one day. I sucked up some water. I got a mouthful of it and I nearly choked. I spat it out and it tasted like plastic chemical to me, something I'd never tasted before. But you know when you go into Bunnings, into the weed spray section, and it's just all chemicals smelled into one? It was a bit like that. So I could smell it and taste it, and I spat it out. And I went, no wonder the bloody horses won't touch it. What's going on here? And then I saw dead cane toads. Pretty hard to kill a cane toad. They're not frogs. Frogs can't leave the water. Cane toads can. So to see dead cane toads shocked me. And there were no frogs. They're gone. All our fish died. All our prawns died. And this was a pivotal moment to me, because I thought, where did this come from? I know exactly where it came from, right? I'm not going to say that here out of respect, but I know exactly where it came from, and we had the water tested, etc. That night, after I had a mouthful, about an hour and a half later, I was in bed, and I spewed my guts up. Whatever that chemical was, it went through my oral mucosa, and you'll absorb anything through your mouth, right? In medical emergencies, we'll give them medicine under the tongue, because maybe we can't find a vein, or the lights are out or whatever. And I obviously, in that few seconds before I spat it out, absorbed enough to make me vomit violently that night. I nearly went to hospital. And I thought, if this doesn't go away, I'm going to have to get someone to drive me in, right? That really motivated me to think about the water and how to clean those dams. And I have since developed some very, very interesting technology to clean water. A lot of people have done things on little drink bottles and stuff. The hydrogen thing's very popular these days. I'm thinking, no. I want to clean something big, right? I want to do 50,000 litres, 100,000 litres in a dam or a water or something like that. Sorry, spring-fed swimming hole. I wanted to get rid of this poison. It was terrible. And it forced me to use all that knowledge that I'd learned over the years doing all these crazy jobs in nature and whatnot. It forced me to really stop and think about what's going on. And there are ways to clean up the water. And when the time's right and the right people ask me, I'll show them how to do it. Right? So that's one little area that the Bush Clinic is involved in. It's born out of the fact that I refuse to use chemicals here anymore. So when you start testing water at the molecular level, you realise it's very rarely ever fresh. There's chemicals everywhere, and our water here should be absolutely pristine, and it is now. So I'm very, very pleased to say we've fixed it a long time ago, and unless it occurs again, it will stay that way, right? But when water is not pure, it doesn't structure itself properly. So there's a lot of people online now talking about structured water. There's a portion of humanity that are onto this. And I've always said to people, you must think of water as a liquid crystal, because it is, actually. And if you understand the properties of liquid crystal, like the screen your viewers are looking through a liquid crystal display, LCD.
Yep.
When you understand those properties and apply it to water, a whole bunch of medical principles start to make sense, like voltage gaps, all sorts of things. And so it got me thinking about toxins in the human body and certain diseases that we still don't know how to cure. And I realised that a lot of the world experts even, bless their cotton socks, but I think sometimes they're barking up the wrong tree, because they certainly do not look at water as a liquid crystal.
Yeah, okay.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, well, I mean, you would argue that before anything that pharma medicine had, we had water. And you have to think, before people stopped living for a long time, I'm not going to throw dates out there because I won't get them exactly right, but people lived in like biblical times and before for a long time. Then something shifted and people started to live less and less and less until we get to the middle dark ages, where if you lived to 40, you'd lived a long life. And then modern medicine as we know it started to develop, but developed in the sense of treatment of symptoms, but not really cures to problems.
Yeah. Yep. And that's something that when I was working as a GP, so I tried to do as many specialties as I could, not specialty exam, but I worked in surgery for years. I've done brain surgery, spinal surgery, heart surgery, lung surgery, cardiothoracic, which is a dying breed. It's basically finished in Australia. It's one or the other these days. Vascular, coughs, colds, and sore holes, we say. A bit of everything, right? That, yeah.
I love doctors.
It just, it got me thinking that, to summarize kind of what you're saying, the answer is to go back to nature. There's not really, apart from toxic plants, okay, and eating rocks or something stupid, there's not really anything in nature that's particularly harmful to the human body, right? So you're right. If we have toxins in our food, or especially our water, etc., that's a tricky one because they're at such low levels. It takes many, many years before the symptoms come out. And it's kind of like there's no case there, if that makes sense. No one puts it together. I can see it. I can see how chronic diseases, a lot of them, come from chronic poisoning at a low level that on a day-to-day basis is below the safe level, right? No big deal.
But it compounds over time.
It's accumulative, or the effects of it are accumulative, right? So again, it points me back to the same direction. And that's why our logo at the Bush Clinic says, find yourself in nature. Multi-level, right? Find yourself in nature. I'm trying to say to people, have you ever wondered why you like sitting next to a lake, which is water, by the way? Have you ever wondered why lots of people love to go bushwalking? They just want to reset their mind, you know. There's this interesting connection with nature. And our horses here have never been locked up on this property. They're always free. And we jokingly say to campers that come here, it's a joke, but I'm also telling them something. We say, hey, listen, if there's any trouble with the horses, because they're free, right, they will come up and say hello to you. If they don't like you, they'll go away, right? It's all cool. They won't chew the rear view off your car. They're extremely well trained and behaved. But if there's ever any trouble, you let me know, okay? And I'll come straight over and we'll lock you guys up in the stables. Because you're in their backyard.
Sure.
It's a respect thing.
Yep.
It's a joke, right? We've never had any trouble. We never will, right? It's a respect thing. I'm saying that our horses are so happy and friendly because they're not locked up. They know this is their home. Literally, we can leave the gate open. Actually, it's open now. They won't leave here. They don't want to go anywhere else, and that's really rare. Most horses will run out the gate, you know, take the bolt, because the poor bloody things are locked up. Now, I'm not saying everybody can take this approach, because we're very lucky to have the spacious land here to do that. But again, it taught me, if you respect the animals and they're happy, they act perfectly. We have no issues. So we do a lot of professional dog training here, actually, usually anxious rescue dogs and things like that. And we use the horses to train the dogs. It's amazing. We've had angry dogs that have taught, like Czech Shepherds are high maintenance working dogs, right? Police dogs. I've trained them for years. We've had dogs here that didn't get through the training. Somebody took them home, didn't look after them properly at home in a small backyard, and the dog's just upset and angry and has killed a bunch of other dogs. We bring them here and we reset them. And the animals here, just by watching their behaviour, I realised why those dogs are so angry, because they're locked up and they're depressed, you know, and they're reflecting the anger of the owners usually. You know, I always say dogs typically reflect their owners. And I guess it segues back into nature, that when you're in a nice, calm, natural environment, a lot of these stresses go away. So you were talking before about, you know, where do you see things going in, you know, certain healthcare topics and society? That's a deep question, but my suggestion is, hey, find yourself in nature, because it's very hard to go wrong.
So would you say then, because I tend to agree, you know, and you do find a lot of people who live in big cities, myself being one, that a good reset is to find yourself somewhere like this and have a few days to just, no screens, no nothing, just no schedule to follow, be around the bird sounds that everyone can hear, you know, nice stream going by, horses nearby, and you find that you can almost, like, your heart rate slows, you calm down, you know, presumably your cortisol levels will drop, you sort of have that detox.
Yeah, so it's really cheap too. Get yourself a tent. Yeah,
well, and is that, the reason I ask that, I guess, is, are you, because as you said, not everyone can sell their house in the city and move to a nice slice of paradise in the countryside. Or maybe they don't want to, whatever the case may be. But you're suggesting maybe once a term, once a year, once a however long, find somewhere that you can...
Yeah, absolutely. And this is a really controversial topic, and it's probably on par with your rule of reason stuff, that camping and councils is pretty controversial at the moment. And I got show cause notices from council, and I hadn't done anything wrong. And I just said, hey, would you mind telling me what law I've broken? Because that's what your email says. You've broken the law. I didn't break any law, right? And they said, oh, you've got mountains up there, so things can fall down. You know, what they call it, a landslide overlay or something like that. We've been here for forever. Really? Do you know what I mean? Like, far out. Half of Australia is going to be shut down. And then they said you're in a flood zone. Really? We're halfway up the mountain. It's impossible to flood here.
Yeah, so they've given you two things that contradict each other. You got a landslide and flood on the side of a mountain.
Anyway, bless their cotton socks, right?
Yep.
Nothing. They're just doing their job, okay? They're just doing their job. But I stuck to my guns. I was going to say I fought, but I didn't fight. I stuck to my guns, and many other people approached me for assistance in this matter, and I said, don't do anything wrong ever, right? Just, if it's truthful, don't be coerced into shutting down something for no reason whatsoever. This is uncharted territory. Now, to explain why it's so important is because you can't readily get into some of these national parks to camp, etc. There's strict rules. The area of connection to nature that I saw, and I've done a lot of work with Hip Camp and whatnot on this, the connection that I saw are the private properties where the owners would like to have a few people come under their rules, right, and enjoy themselves, because some of the best properties around, they're all private, right? Like here, for example. And we have a whole bunch, look, we don't let many campers in here, but we got a whole bunch of beautiful sites, and you can't see the next person camping. You know, like 5 acres each kind of thing. And I could see that if all these places were shut down through council, then guys like you in the city might want to take your kids camping for the weekend and just get out of the big smoke, right? Where are you going to go? You know, to me, this was really critical to go, hang on, no one's doing anything wrong, right? If there's a bushfire, we know what we're doing. We manage our own property. And I can tell you, under state law, you're responsible for firefighting on your own property, right? If you get help, you're very, very lucky. But when there's big fires, and this is something that's come up recently, they just don't have the resources to go everywhere.
Of course not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, we're pretty lucky here because most of what we got's rainforest, and it doesn't typically burn. It can, and it will, but it's just so, it's significantly cooler even in the summer.
Can I just... Your throwaway line was, it can and it will. A lot of people listening at home, there's a lot of outrage in Australia over bushfires and management of national parks. This is Australia. Like, we have bushfires.
Yeah,
We've always
burns.
had bushfires. Like,
That fire's burning right next to me.
trees burn. So when we have big fires, they go, oh my gosh, the world's burning to the ground, and this has never happened before. Don't have such a short view of history. Big bushfires have happened in Australia since well before people were ever here. And they will continue to after we're gone.
Yes.
That's my point said. Please continue.
Interesting topic. In many areas, especially in Northern Territory, I mean, it burns every year, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And we were talking about the charcoal layer in the ground. Well, that's the fertility in the ground. So that charcoal breaks down into humic compounds. So most people talk about humic acid and fulvic acid. Humic is darker, and it's the stuff that makes dirt brown. So you know that mud you get bogged in, right? That's loaded with natural humic compounds. It's not one compound. It's hundreds, if not thousands, of separate compounds. And it's known to be extremely healthy to take it. It's well known in medicine that if somebody's had an overdose or a poisoning, the first thing they get, provided it's within 20 minutes or something like that. So there's caveats on this story, right? But activated charcoal is frequently used. I've actually got some in the car because I was painting my fence, the wooden fence, with expensive pharmaceutical grade activated charcoal, and I mixed it with sunboil. It's perfect. It sticks like paint, and the fence is jet black, and you need, I think I put 3 tablespoons of activated charcoal in a 10-litre drum of sunboil. Gets rid of any white ants, costs you nothing. Do you know what I mean? There's amazing simple solutions to problems, and I love this area, right? That's what the Bush Clinic is about. We've got a lot of things planned for down the track, but I know that there's a portion of society turning their attention back to nature, and there are so many simple, cheap, effective ways to get rid of stress. In the future, there will be more medical problems, I believe, that will be solved by turning attention back to nature. Unfortunately, the big pharma that we were talking about, it's not really in their best interest to do this because they don't make any money. And there's big bucks in this game. So when a doctor writes a script on PBS or something, you might pay $6.50 or whatever. But if you read the bottom of the label, it'll say it was $126. And the government pays for that. So actually you paid for it out of your tax.
Yep.
Big bucks for a little packet of pills. Do you know what I mean? Big bucks. So these days, one of the things I've been interested in is not only just testing water, but also testing food. I mean, we all know some of the fruits and veg just don't taste like they used to.
That's, 100%.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Your grandma and your grandpa will definitely tell you that, right? They'll go, oh, I can't taste strawberries anymore. And there's a reason for that, right? They're lacking nutrition.
Well, strawberries also used to be this big.
Yeah.
Now they're like this big. And you're like, oh, well, it's only because it's genetically modified. I'm like, yes, but that's clearly done something to the food.
It looks good, and, who doesn't like a big strawberry, right?
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is your sense of taste in your mouth is actually telling you the nutritional value of what you're about to eat, right? So when things taste bad, they probably are bad. Do you know what I mean? And probably when people don't like certain foods, like the old Brussels sprouts, there's probably something going on in a young person's body that they've got too much of this or something like that. There's so many natural reasons for things happening if you can laterally think about it and just use your common sense. And I see this as an emerging area more so than ever before because, well, I'm going to say organisations like AHPRA are telling the doctors how to think, what to think, and what to say, even certain words. And you know what? We should be telling them what we think. Do you know what I mean? I'm not saying it in an arrogant point of view, but if you're really good at what you do as a doctor and you've helped all these people, why get busted because your script statistics went down? I got nailed once for not writing enough PPI scripts for gastric reflux. I thought they came to give me some kind of an award or something. That's how dumb I was, right? But this guy came from the government and he printed out a graph, bell curve. And he goes, guess where you are on here? And I went, I don't know. And he goes, that's you, right in the bottom 1%. I went, oh, awesome. And he goes, what do you mean awesome? And I went, oh, I don't even know what's going on here. I got racked on the knuckles, right? Because I wasn't prescribing in the bell curve for one particular script. The reason was I knew how to fix these people. And they're on their bike and they go home fixed. And I'm like, hey, I love you, man, but don't come and see me. If you don't see me, it means I've done my job as a doctor.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? We'll catch up at the pub for a beer or something, right? That's what my goal was, to actually fix people. And it was a big wake-up call to me to get a tap on the shoulder because I wasn't writing enough scripts.
Yeah, well, I mean, my attitude towards a GP, it was, I don't want to become too good of friends with you because hopefully, not disrespectfully, I never see you again.
Yeah.
Because I'm not feeling well, I see you, you tell me how to get better, and then I'm better.
Yeah.
So it's...
So what you're touching on is the fact that a lot of the treatment these days, I'm sorry, it is linked to money. It should not be. And never think that these doctors don't know any better. Never think that they could do better. It's not fair. I have worked on both sides. I know both sides of the fence. 99% of the doctors are absolutely bloody amazing. The most arrogant ones, there's a couple. They're usually the best. They're so good at what they do, they can get away with it, right?
Sure.
And if you're there to get help, just listen, learn. And if you don't like them, go and bloody find somebody else. Who cares, right?
Yep.
But what I'm saying is it's the system that they're in that's restrictive. And this is why it was really hard for me to voluntarily deregister because I knew I'd never get it back again. right?
Of course.
It was the hardest, easiest thing I've ever done, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And it was like a weight lifted from my shoulders. But I was also equally sad because I thought I'd be doing this for the rest of my days. And I found myself in circumstances where I know ways that are benign and harmless to help people, but we're not allowed to do it. Or there's something wrong. And I'm like, could you explain to me what's wrong with this? This is great. They should have been giving me a bloody prize and a packet of free chips or something for not writing so many scripts. They should have been saying,
what are you doing?
How did you do it, man?
So we can tell everyone else how to do it.
So we can tell everybody else, right?
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean? So the system it's got its flaws, right? Now, I'm not going to say that as a pessimistic thing, because just about everything's got its flaws if you look hard enough, right?
Well, I would also argue, and I apologise for jumping in, but any industry, even up to... There seems to be a growing mistrust in politicians at the moment. It's certainly becoming more prevalent in social media. And it's because it's not about... I think everyone knows, even if they can't articulate it, you don't really care what people say to you. It's what people do. So people can say they've got the greatest intentions in the world, but if their actions speak completely different, you're like, well, why would I listen to anything you have to say? And so you look at politicians who say, we're going to make the country great.
Yep.
But then the country gets worse. And then you do a little bit more digging and you go, oh, but they went on this retreat with this person who now just got this new contract, and you start going, oh, people can be bought. You know, and I'm not singling out any individual.
No, of course not.
It is a innate human nature for self-preservation. So if someone comes to you and says, hey, you might only be doing this for this long, what are you going to do after that? I can help you. You just need to do this for me. And if that's the case for politicians, then it'd be the case for bankers, business people, doctors, where, Pfizer comes along and goes, hey.
Well, on that note, there's a very interesting point. I can tell you no one ever gave me a free weekend away. Now, that's usually what it is. I know it happens. I know plenty of people that have had a great weekend away. Doctors are stressed, right? If you're a male doctor, your wife suffers. If you're a female doctor, your husband's not going to see you. It's just a really, really freaking tough job. Nobody ever threw anything like that at me. Having said that, we would have reps come in every single week. So this is not every month. This is like every Tuesday, every Thursday, whatever. Every clinic, same deal. They're not silly. If you want to catch a doctor's attention, you have to bait them with food, right? Doctors don't eat because they're just busy. I can tell you, I never had a lunch break. I just saw the next patient if they were in early, because I'm thinking, if I sit here and twiddle my thumbs eating a sandwich, I'm just going to go home late. Bugger that. Let's all do this now. So it was like 12-hour shift without a blink of an eyelid. And if you want to butt in for half an hour time of a doctor, you lure them with food, right? Hey, it gets me every time. Free tucker in the lunchroom. I'm up and we'll go, yeah. That's a good medicine. Yeah, awesome. Really? I've got to go. Burp, right?
Yeah.
It's really funny how it works. So I don't want people to think that there's bribery going on at a regular level. There's definitely not. I've never seen it. And it could be the guys knew better than to say that to me anyway. Do you know what I mean? They're
Sure.
not silly.
Yeah.
I'm saying there's nothing nasty, there's nothing bad, but there are flaws in the system, and the incentives are subtly there in the background. And just what bothers me is that you can't patent a natural substance, which means the big companies that probably would want to do this, it's not worth their time. So what they have to do is spend millions and millions to develop a synthetic analog, right? Then they created it and they can patent it, right? That's what Big Pharma is all about. Can you mimic nature with a chemical? That's really what I'm saying. And hey, save your money, go back to the natural solution, you're going to feel better anyway. So what I basically learnt is that there is an extremely strong correlation between synthetic treatments and disease. And to go right back to what you said at the start, it's perpetuated. So you keep taking the medication for the symptoms and it never gets better. And I've met some of the top guys in the world in natural medicine, and a lot of them have very kindly taken me under their wing and taught me stuff. They know how I think. They know I'm not against conventional medicine. no way, right? You're mad if you don't go and see a doctor. If you're sick, you better go and see a doctor, right? They're not out to get you. So there's a lot of people getting stressed and angry at the moment, and I understand their frustration. They want more natural solutions, and they're just not getting it, right? And the truth is, they should be delivered by doctors. I have seen circumstances where some of the natural remedies are quite dangerous. Yeah, sorry, there's a bit of wind in
No, that's right.
Bit of wind in the mic. You guys can deal with it, eh?
Add it to the chicken and bird noises.
Yeah, that's my chook miles away. That's our rooster actually. Before, I'm going to say it's about 1 kilometre away. It's pretty good.
Sound travel. Well, we talked about the acoustics in this valley.
I think he's got the munchies.
You can smell the smoke.
Yeah, he can smell the smoke probably. So yeah, there's nothing bad about this. I understand people's frustration. The problem is in the legislation and the statutes in our country that do not allow the experts to help people. Now, I thought doctors swore to help people, right? In the Hippocratic Oath, is it? Or is it Hippocratic Oath? I can't remember.
I would guess Hippocratic, but
yeah,
people will know what we're talking about.
They know exactly what we're talking about. I thought we swore to do that. Do no harm and all that business, right? Yet the statutes and legislation, and particularly APRA, they've got a lot to answer for at the moment. And I can tell you that, unfortunately, they've upset a lot of doctors. I'm not one of them. I'm not upset about this, but I can see the division and I can see some of the solutions, and I understand why people are frustrated. So I don't ever want anybody to think, don't be racist against the medical system. You know what I mean? We all racism's bad, right?
Well, people like outrage at the moment, but that's not helpful.
Those poor doctors have their hands tied and they're gagged. I can tell you that now.
Well, here's a question for you then. Are you hopeful, or is there a way for the legislation to change? Question 1. And 2, if it did change, the advantage to pharmaceuticals is it's convenient. Are natural remedies, from a distribution standpoint, equally as convenient for the average person?
Potentially, yes. So I'm going to answer you with a strange answer, and I'm going to tell you that most of the amazing stuff that I know, you can buy it on eBay. A child can buy it on eBay. What does that tell you? It's perfectly safe. Right? Now, not everything's safe, because a child can go into Bunnings and buy something as well and drink it and die. Right? I'm not trying to say this is a blanket thing, but yeah, these solutions are readily accessible. The problems are people don't understand it, and it's dangerous to mess around with this stuff if you don't know what you're doing. You need an expert. The doctors rarely, if ever, get into the naturopathy or whatever the field might be. They're stuck in that system. And the reverse is true for the naturopaths that didn't learn all the stuff that the doctors learned. They didn't have the privilege of surgery and stitching people up and all that accumulated knowledge. To me, my dream that I see happening is to bridge the two. And there are a lot of doctors now that are self-deregistering for whatever reason. They will speak out more and more. You will definitely hear the story coming up. They're not angry. Well, I certainly hope they're not, but they've got kids to feed, lives to live, and they've done all these years of study. It's insanely difficult to do that degree, right? And I can tell you, the day you graduate, you think, oh, yeah, this is great. And in the next 10 minutes, you realise you're at the bottom of the shit pile again, right? And the nurses know 10 times more than you do, right? And the whole cycle of learning starts again. So you said before that I sort of worked my way up to the top. I wouldn't say I worked my way up to the top. I did work with the FBI and I helped them design systems and various things like that. I would just say that I was comfortable with what I was doing, and thankfully I had a lot of people that knew that I was solution orientated and that I'd passionately come up with some kind of an answer or whatever. But back to the medical system, I see the answer with these two systems merging somehow. Now, at the moment, legislation doesn't really allow that. You can't practice outside of an accredited clinic. And do you know what? You shouldn't really be able to be honest, because all sorts of dodgy things could go on, right? So how do you find the answer to the people that want natural solutions? They need expertise to do it safely, it's not really properly regulated. So, yeah, you're right. It's going to come back to these politicians. And if they don't start listening to common sense, like I could sit down at a table and say, this is what you could do instead of that, and this and this and this, right? I wouldn't say it if I wasn't fairly confident on it, right? They should be listening and saying, hey, we need to set up a new arm to do this. If the politicians don't listen to what the people want, sooner or later, they're going to lose their job. It's inevitable, right?
I guess the cynicism that's creeping in, especially in young people, is that really going to make a difference, though? Like we would say, and this is as someone who is passionate about democracy, politicians need to be good at their job because otherwise they'll lose it and someone else will come in and do a better job. The cynicism and the cynic in me, and certainly the cynic in young people, is it doesn't really matter who we elect. They're all the same.
Yeah, so that's you're right. It's a sinister point of view. I'm just trying to choose my words carefully here. A lot of people are frustrated with politicians. Again, I would say if you put yourself in their shoes, the system makes it very difficult for them to speak openly without getting attacked, right? So in other words, I'm going to say, as a doctor, I'm going to make an unofficial diagnosis that our system is a little bit sick at the moment and needs some attention. A little bit of TLC. We need to go back to first principles because things have gotten out of whack. And I know a lot of people are very stressed about this. I see people all the time, they say, I'm not going to a bloody doctor. And I say, listen, if you're a crook, you better go and see a doctor. It doesn't mean you have to listen to everything or whatever, but go and see what they've got to say because they're good people and they know what they're doing. So I'm against any anger towards anyone, be it politicians or doctors or systems or whatever. I'm saying, let's be positive about this. Let's listen to the people that know what they're talking about and let's implement some changes. Do something constructive.
Yeah. Yeah, part of what I'm trying to achieve with Rule of Reason is to provide a better story for the future, hope for the future, right? We're at a point in human history that really just, it seems all too common. What's the word I'm trying to think of? There are echoes throughout history. If you're a purveyor of human history, this has happened before. What's unfortunate about what has happened before, whether it be the 20s and 30s, or you go back to the 1810s, or you can keep going back as far as you want, but it usually ends in revolution and lots of death. I am hopeful if the right people can do the right things, and it's a vague statement, and I only say that because I wish I had the answer to the solution, and I'm trying to find it. But I want a solution that unites people, not divides them.
Yes.
And avoids the revolution altogether. Maybe it's naive, but I'm hopeful.
To me, it's absolutely critical that people don't turn their frustration into anger, or the reverse of that would be fear. So when people feel cornered or they feel they're not getting the treatment that they should get, like cancer, wow, we've been researching it forever and people are dropping like flies at the moment. I'm just putting it out there. If you look at the statistics, don't you think we'd be getting a lot better? Now, the first thing I would say about cancer is that there's so many billions of bloody varieties of it. It's one word that sums up hundreds and hundreds of different types of cancer. And they are very different. They do have some things in common, like they all love sugar, right? And I won't get too far into this because I know a bit more about this than I'm letting on.
Well, we can save that conversation for another day.
Yeah, I think so.
That might be a conversation all in itself.
But my point is, there's a lot of anger and fear and frustration. So people need to start thinking positive and going, hey, let's come up with some positive solutions. It doesn't have to be bad like what you're saying, right? For me personally, I realise that when you're signed up with AHPRA, you are actually engaged in a lawful contract. So when they discipline people, and by the way, AHPRA do a great job by and large. Okay, they stop a lot of dodgy things from happening, all sorts of things, not necessarily deliberately bad, but they do definitely need to be overseen. Okay, I don't know that you could not blanket approach it like that. However, I'm saying that there are aspects to APRA where they regulate things way too much. They're out of their jurisdiction, and they do it legally because the doctor is under a contract. Right now,
Sure.
I thought APRA is part of the government years ago. They're not. Right? There's the way the structure is set up is probably not what everybody thinks, and I'll leave it there. But what I'm saying is there are solutions, and there are actually people kicking around now that are setting up private contracts and things like that. They're looking for ways to do something constructive. So my overall, it's such a complex topic, my overall blanket topic is to say it's very hard to go wrong in nature, right? But our current legislation doesn't allow the expert doctors to engage that area effectively, if that makes sense.
Sure.
And I would like to see some improvement in that.
Okay. So looking forward then, based on what you know, both what you've said and what you maybe can't say today, where you're hoping the Bush Clinic will go, the state of medicine in general, whether it be Australia or globally, where do you see things going over the next 5 years? Do you think they'll get worse before they get better?
No. Both.
Sure.
Some areas are going to get worse. Some areas are going to get better. It will happen simultaneously. And ultimately, the worst things, they might crescendo and shrink, but the good things will come up. So I can personally guarantee you, from my point of view, of course you make your own mind up and so do your viewers, right? But from my point of view, it's not doom and gloom. You're looking at the deconstruction, the systematic deconstruction of things that people are no longer interested in. And at the same time, good, honest people are coming up with amazing solutions to implement. In terms of healing, I can tell you, I have spoken to many people and there's some amazing technology on the horizon. The tricky part is some of it's not real. Actually, most of what I see is not real and doesn't work, and I would advise caution, right? There's a lot of people making claims that are not...
As in the solutions they're talking about aren't
Yeah,
real.
like treatments.
Okay.
There's also stuff all over eBay and goodness knows what, right? So again, you need that expertise to find out what's real and what's not. So I've bought some of these instruments ages ago and tested them. I want to know what wavelength of light's coming out of that red lamp. A lot of these things have the wrong frequencies or the wrong wavelengths or something like that. And that's where a future regulation would really come into handy, but it's not even acknowledged these days. There is no, in Australia, there's no acknowledgement on these alternate therapies. Some of them are amazing in work, and then the caveat on that is if you use them in the wrong circumstances, you can cause more harm than good. I know somebody recently, I just happened to know this person, that they were using blue light therapy. And blue light therapy can be amazing, it really can. But this poor chap made himself sick, and he actually said to me, he's an expert in this area, by the way. He used the blue light therapy at night time. He was feeling very tired for whatever reason, and he thought, I'll get into some of this blue light stuff, right? And he used it at night time, and you shouldn't use it at night time. And it's to do with the sun and the natural circadian rhythm. So we're back on nature again, right? The natural circadian rhythm of the body changes with light. This is something that I've worked out quite some time ago, and it's not currently understood in conventional medicine. But your body functions more than you realize on light. Now, every word that's coming out of my mouth, I will defend.
You need to listen to Andrew Huberman, because he speaks hugely about the power of the sun and how one of the best things that you can do first thing in the morning is get 10 minutes of sunlight on your face, on your skin as much as possible. I'm not even going to begin to talk about his 2.5 episode where he talks about what it does.
Massive topic.
But yeah, the point is, that seems almost self-evident to me. Like, if you were to remove all these wonderful technologies that humans have created, before we had any of this, how did you know it was daytime?
Yep. And what you're doing right now is going back to nature. So the simplest way I could say it is it relates to your natural circadian rhythm, right? And in short, I would say a lot of people are stuck in this artificial world looking at screens and look, they're just doing their job and living their lives, right? But it's too much. That technology is amazing, right? And for all the people scared about AI, I would say, hey, go and watch Star Trek. They talk to the bloody computer all the time, and it calculates things that they don't want to calculate on paper, right?
It's a good assistant, but a bad master.
Yeah, it's AI is simultaneously amazing and super scary. It depends how you want to engage it. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, of course.
And I think I forgot what I was going to say now. Must have been nonsense.
But we were leaning into light and the sun.
Oh yeah, that's right, light.
Yep.
So your body is always emitting light. Do you know if you concentrate DNA, put it in a jar, turn out the lights, and have a very sensitive camera, it actually emits light on its own. Fact.
Interesting.
So what I said before is I'm happy to back up anything that I say, and people should be able to look it up online. Right?
Here's a question for you, okay? And we've known each other for a long time, so I know that you won't take offense. For anyone that's listening that goes, this guy's a crazy person. You know, he likes crystallized liquid and he's talking about wavelengths of light and blah, 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 and it's all about going to the bush. And naturopaths, which I will admit, most of my friends have a pretty low opinion of naturopaths versus modern medicine. And I would argue perhaps that comes from there are a handful of bad ones that have tarnished the reputation of the good ones.
Maybe.
That might be a fair assessment. For those people listening that are skeptical of of everything that you've said so far, if the solution truly is natural therapies, more so than it is, and as you've mentioned, it's not that modern medicine is not good. It will help you if you're dying and you're feeling sick and whatever.
You better go there.
But if the solutions truly are natural remedies, how do you actually overcome the stigma, let alone the distribution problem? Is that a fair question?
Yeah, I'm just unpacking that because there's so many facets to it, but we're kind of on the same topic again of statutes and legislation, and you really do need some expertise in this area.
Do you think if the government came on board and changed the legislation, that in itself would remove some of the stigma? Because people go, well, if the government trusts in this, then we can trust in this?
Perhaps, yeah. I think people need to maintain an open mind, and I have spent untold amounts of time trying to scientifically understand these principles. As I said, a lot of them are garbage. And again, how do you know? Unless you've done years and years and years of work on this, how do you know the difference, right? That's why you go and approach an expert and see what they've got to say. And if it resonates with you, go for it. If it doesn't, go and find somebody else. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Nobody gets upset. But there are certain facets that need to be stitched together. And what I'm saying is our modern medicine completely ignores this stuff.
Yeah.
And the other thing I said is there's new technologies coming out, right? It's inevitable. And a lot of it is based on light. There's a lot of stuff on sound. I could talk about this forever. And what I was going to say before is that your body emits light. So I said DNA glows in the dark, but DNA is not metabolizing ATP and things like that to make heat. But when your body is warm, people forget the fact that is actually infrared heat. And that's light. You can see it on a thermal camera, right? It means your body is always producing light unless you go and jump in the freezer and die, right? So long as your heart's pumping, you're making light. And this is a massive area in medicine that has been overlooked.
Well, I think this is my personal observation, and I have zero qualifications to back this up, so take it with a grain of salt, everybody. As a Christian, I would argue that's your spirit or your soul. And you would probably agree, whether you call it that or not, you would agree, having witnessed people die, that their physical state changes when they are officially dead, which I would say is the spirit leaves the body.
Yeah, I would not argue against that.
You could categorize it as their glow, their aura, their whatever, but are we on the same page here a little bit with that's what that might be?
It's complicated, and in my mind, a lot of the spiritual terms and things that are said actually have a scientific basis. Now, for example, a conventional doctor could not say what I'm about to tell you. I know auras are real. I don't need somebody to tell me. I have seen them. I have technology that can view it, right? It's absolutely real. I know that, but if I came out and said that to people, they'd think I'm a nutcase, right?
Sure.
And APRA would bust you going, you're a Fruit Loop, right?
Yeah.
Out the back.
Yeah.
I happen to know that it's real. And there have been people in the past that have invented various means to see this, and it's never ever made its way into conventional medicine. So I find that fascinating. I've gone back and reviewed these guys, and they knew what they were on about, right? They were geniuses. They were pioneers. And, people like Victor Schauberger and, so many amazing guys in the past. Like Victor Schauberger mostly focused on water, but he looked at nature. So he looked at how fish swim. Do you know, if you go into... Okay, we'll talk about trout. So Victor Schauberger loved his trout, lived up in the cold mountains. Water is optimized at 4 degrees. A special thing happens at exactly 4 degrees. This is why our old-fashioned fridges were set to 4 degrees. Right? It's the maximum density point of water. It's not when it freezes, because ice floats on top of water, right? Yeah? And then when you warm up the water, it goes to the top and then steam and floats up. So the 4 degrees is the magic point. Victor Schauberger knew this. So if you can imagine a trout in a creek, oh, too much wind. If that trout's just sitting there, reading the newspaper and the water's flowing past, they always point upstream, right? And you go, yeah, that makes sense because they're streamlined in that direction. Okay, it's like flying a plane backwards. Why is it that if you scare that trout, if you chuck a rock on the water or something, the trout will escape upstream? Don't you think they would want to swim downstream with the current and get away twice as fast?
That does make sense.
It does makes a shitload of sense, right? Victor Schauberger was so clever that he realized it's more efficient for them to go upstream, and he actually worked out that it was related to the 4 degrees in the water. So he did a demonstration once, and he had his mate 100 meters upstream, and they boiled up this big cauldron of hot water, put it in, like he signaled to him, tip it in the creek, warmed up the water by a few degrees. So this little thing of hot water's coming down, or warm water's coming down the creek. And when it got to the trout, he spooked the trout, and it was unable to swim upstream because of the temperature difference in the water, right? This is a really, really fascinating topic. And he was able to show why the trout swim upstream and how it's related to water and various other things. So spring water needs to be cool. And that's why there's always trees shading the spring water to keep it cool. If you have a spring water, if you cut down the trees around the spring and the sunlight warms it up, you will lose your spring. Sooner or later you'll lose it. And all the old farmers will tell you the same thing. If the trees grow back, you might get the spring back, or you might not. Maybe the water had to go somewhere else, right? And that's an example of, you were talking before about the bush clinic. So we've done a lot of research on this to maintain the natural environment around spring water. And we are in big trouble if we lose our spring water. Spring water is absolutely magic. And for all of your viewers that understand this concept about structured water and whatnot, well, spring water is magic. It's absolutely magic stuff. So there's so many things that I've learnt over my lifetime where I now go, hang on, we've strayed too far from nature, and no wonder we've got all these problems. And some people are not healthy and they've covered in eczema because there's chlorine or something in the water. So I had patients in the past, the poor kids were covered in horrible eczema, like their skin's bleeding, and we worked out by accident that it was the water. And I remember one particular bloke went out to see his family out in the middle of nowhere out west, and the kid was showering or bathing in different water, and they got better.
Yeah.
And we didn't figure it out that quickly. They came back, eczema came back to see me. We're running around in circles. When they cleaned up the water in the house, the kid was cured. So I'm not suggesting that's placebo. It was a young child that didn't really care or get this. They just knew they were a crook, right? But that inspired me to start testing water. And find out what's actually in it. So one thing leads to another thing, leads to another thing. Pure spring water is absolutely magic. There's a reason why the old guys called things like the fountain of youth and all of that. I'm not saying that's literally. They just knew the value of spring water.
So do any of the home filtration systems, whether they be on a tap or it's a jug, a filtered jug, or even those the newer home filtration systems from the water main, do they work?
Yeah, okay. The first thing I would say, another really complicated topic, it depends on what you're trying to get out of the water.
Well, I guess the question is people at home who are going, oh, well, maybe that's why I've got skin problems and blah, blah, blah. Do they just need to go, cool, I'll just get one of those installed and it's fixed?
Definitely not, no. That was just an example, and the caveat is we're not giving any medical advice in this talk.
Of course,
right?
yeah.
We're having a friendly chat. I would say if they've got a skin problem, go and see your doctor, right? I'll give everybody the same answer.
But if the doctor says, hey, here's a steroid cream, again, this is what we talked about. That's a symptom, and you're treating the symptom. You're not treating what's causing it.
Yes.
Here's an example, right? I had terrible eczema, like we've just talked about, and I tried all sorts of creams and tablets and whatever, would not go away. So I decided it's probably diet related. All water, but I didn't go down that far. Did an elimination diet, worked out artificial sweetener. Had way too much artificial sweetener in my diet. Removed it, it all went away. And that obviously links to gut health, right? So my gut microbiome was obviously way out of whack. Got it sorted, skin's better.
So you're taking a synthetic compound that you didn't really realise. You thought you were doing the right thing by ditching sugar, but you opened another door, didn't you?
Yeah, into something that's far worse, apparently.
Good example. So this is shaky ground to talk about because of all these regulations and whatnot in Australia. So I'll caveat this again. I'm not giving anyone medical advice. If you've got a problem, go and see your doctor, right? This is a friendly chat. We're all on the same page.
Of course.
But it's a very good example of where you might have another reason for your eczema, and if you didn't see the doctor, you wouldn't know, right? There's all sorts of, like skin was one of my specialties, and there's all sorts of things that you need to get checked out. So I'm saying the problem with the natural stuff is it's a little bit voodoo at the moment. We need some input. I'm not saying the naturopaths don't do an amazing job, because they absolutely do, right? It's just that they lack the knowledge and experience that the conventional doctors have. You see, they're like two separate areas kept apart strategically.
Yeah.
And the answer for any of these questions, I would say, in the future, we need to bring some of the doctors back into the natural therapies that actually work. They need to be scrutinised, made sure that they're safe. Most of them are extremely safe. That's why you can get this stuff on eBay. There's no regulations on it at all. They don't want to acknowledge that it works, for starters, and it's safe. But back to blue light therapy, for example, this poor chap that I mentioned had used far too much of it, and he made himself crook, right? And this is why a lot of people have issues looking at computer screens too much. They call it blue light technology.
Mm-hmm.
And you're right, it's related to the sunlight, and there's a reason why the sky is blue. There's a scientific reason why it's blue. It's complicated to do with refraction, etc. But it's still got a blue tinge to it during the day. And this is what I was saying, that this guy is a bit of an expert, actually, but he told me, he said, I made a mistake. I used the blue light at nighttime. Right? You're meant to be in the dark at nighttime, aren't you? You see what I mean?
Yep.
Your skin is sensitive to light in the infrared band,
well,
which
that's
is
why,
the opposite of blue.
Which is why a lot of screens now, you can actually remove the blue light from your screens.
Yep. That's exactly, yeah. Actually, on my phone, I've got that set on there as well.
Yeah.
When it goes blue, I'm like, ugh. You know, it's does this weird thing to you. There is so much interesting science behind this. There's a reason why police lights flash alternately in red and blue, by the way. It puts people into fight or flight mode. It's effective, and it gets your attention. So this has all been studied long before. There's untold amounts of information on poker machines alone. You know, the sound, and it gets the endorphins going, and blah, 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 blah. So a lot of this stuff that I'm talking about has actually already been commercialized. And it is known that the color green can have effects on people too, visually. And I find this absolutely fascinating. I used to think it was all voodoo garbage. I really did. I thought it was absolute nonsense, because that's what I was trained to think like. And I've since gone, hang on a minute, I want to actually test this and see it. These trees around you, we've been out here with photospectrometers and measured the frequencies of light that come underneath the leaves. And we've been able to work out, for example, I'm just plucking this out of thin air because I'm looking around. At night time, if you put UV light on them, they will fluoresce in different colours. And some of them are blue and some of them are red. So we're back on the blue and red again, right? And when the natural sunlight comes down with all of these different frequencies in it, we found out why these weeds here are so important. They're really annoying, they're spiky, but they've got a big fat leaf because that leaf is creating as much shade as possible. And what happens is they'll only grow for 2 years and then they turn into a stick. There's one behind you there that's 2 years old and it's just a stick. Underneath that tree, I guarantee you, you'll find rainforest saplings growing up. So they provide this blanket frequency screen that enables the rainforest trees on this particular location to be protected. Why do you think they're covered in spikes, right? The wallabies won't go in there and eat the shoots that they would otherwise love to eat, and that tree never gets a chance. They won't go near that one. It's really nasty, spiky. So what I'm saying is we've been able to get rainforest to grow back here, I'm going to say 10 times quicker than anywhere I've seen before, because I let the weeds do their thing. They're like pioneer weeds, and it's related to light. You can't buy shade cloth that puts out the frequency of these leaves. Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
So I'm saying we've been there during the day and measured it. We've been there at night time and measured it. And the temperature is approximately 7 degrees cooler. And you can see behind me, there's a spring right behind us. Can you feel that cool air coming up now?
Yeah.
So the mics are picking it up. Sometimes it's from that direction. When the cool air comes up behind us, it's like air conditioning. It's on average 7 to 10 degrees cooler.
Oh, anyone that's made it this far through the episode that's watching it, you'll see I was bathed in sunlight for a while and I was cooking. But now, it's lovely with that breeze in the shade. It's great.
Yeah. So, we're just touching on the concept of light alone. There's so much to it. Why do you think your skin produces melanin when you get sunburnt regularly? It's changing the frequency of light. It's adjusting. And our bodies have so much more interesting stuff going on that because I've learnt the conventional stuff and I've looked at a lot of alternate things, I can see some of the links between them, if that makes sense to you. And I just want to see everyday doctors not laugh some of this stuff off as nonsense when I know damn well they've never even looked into it. Do you see what I mean? That's the ultimate problem. It's not their fault, but there are some better solutions that should be revised.
Of course. And I would say the cynic in me says there are a number of things in this world, in every facet, that we have been programmed to think that's crazy.
Yeah.
If you believe that, you're a crazy person.
I can tell you, I thought all of it was crazy.
Yeah.
All of it. Until I actually looked into it.
And I'm not just talking natural medicine. We're talking all sorts of different things. And I'm hoping to interview in future episodes people from all backgrounds, and they can talk about similar things, so we can start to see, hey, hold on, we've had the wool pulled out of our eyes for a long time. This is actually like there's a very small group of people pulling the strings to control everybody else, and let's try and level these playing fields here a little bit. I'm going to say that to digress slightly, because you could talk about all of this stuff for a very long time.
Go on forever.
But I want to give you the time to talk a little bit more specifically about what the Bush Clinic is. Are we talking it's a place for people to come and you teach them about nature? Hey, here's bush medicine. Here's what you can and can't eat, blah, blah, blah. Or is it more a literal, this is a clinic and I have a medical license and I'm going to do medicine both with Naturopathy?
Naturopathy.
Thank you.
It's
I was
tongue
like, yeah, and medicine, or like what exactly is the Bush Clinic? What's your vision for the Bush Clinic?
It's in its fetal stage.
Yeah,
would be the start. So we're not practicing anything. There's no medical treatments going on here. I've had people from APRA come camping here just to check it out, which is hilarious.
Yeah,
like we sit down and have a beer. It's a great time.
Sure.
Good. So they should. I don't mind at all.
So the fundamental is just be in nature, find yourself in nature.
So
right?
what I was
being here is the start, but there's more to it, right? There's a deeper layer of where you're going with this.
Yeah, so what I was going to say is to give you, on such a broad question, I have to give you a vague answer. And the vague answer is there's no limit to the concept of reconnecting with nature. So the bush clinic is more of a concept. The name comes from a real story, actually. I won't bore you with it, but we used to joke about a bush clinic out at bush, and we'd catch up and have a beer and whatnot. We just called it the bush clinic. I don't know who came up with it, but that's where the name actually came from. But it's more, at the moment, we just let a handful of people come in here and go camping because I know it helps them, right? You're not permitted to practice. I'm not allowed to use my medical knowledge outside of a clinic. Until that changes, I won't. I never have and I never will, right?
Is there legislation that would allow you to designate your property as a clinic? Or no, because you'd still be hamstrung by certain legislation?
Getting into a very, very complicated topic. Yeah.
That's for next time.
Topic.
That's for next time.
Yeah.
I interrupted.
So, no, that's okay. I do some consulting work. So some people that might have a big farming business or something, they have an issue or they're looking for something better or they want to use less sprays or something like that. And we've got a whole bunch of solutions that we've developed and tested. Partly it was born out of, I realised that when our water was poisoned, I had to figure out how to clean it. Do you know, partly we use sound. Yep.
Yeah, wow.
Sound. Like, sounds crazy, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Get it? Sounds sorry.
Yeah.
We use sound, and I realised I started recording frogs, and I analysed the frequencies and the harmonics on a very good oscilloscope, for example, and I realised that there is a pattern to the sound. It's actually based on 369. Now, anyone would just about laugh their head off at that, and I can tell you if they sat down with me, they wouldn't be laughing because I can prove it to them. They're only laughing because they've never looked into it, right? And if they want to write me off, I don't care. I couldn't give a rat's, right? But I have taken the time to analyse the frequencies from birds and frogs and crickets and all sorts of things. And there is actually a mathematical pattern to it. And you can, for the structured water guys, sound can restructure water, right? It's actually why a lot of the ancient cultures chanted. They weren't just singing because they're bored, they were chanting. And if you look at all those really, really old churches, you'll see that they're all symmetrical from the front. They'll have two spires and then a big one or whatever. They're all different. Windows, 3 doors, whatever. They're symmetrical, and they were designed symmetrically out of stone specifically to resonate with sound, and that's why people sing in them. And you can take a microphone in there with an oscilloscope and find the resonant harmonics of that building, and they happen to match certain numbers that I can record out here in nature. That is no accident. Whoever built those buildings, they knew. Right? So I'm just trying to
Of course they
give
did.
an example.
No, that and this goes back to what I mentioned about history. We're very quick to forget what we knew once upon a time. And there are all these things that we look at and marvel at and go, how did people do that? Because we've forgotten. Now it's like, oh,
Totally.
we're gonna build something. So let's just slap 4 walls of concrete up and that's a building. And it's like there's something more than just the visual beauty of architecture in the ancient world. Because it was designed on purpose.
So a short topic, which is actually massive, is crystals. So I referred to liquid crystal before, but solid crystals, I used to, again, think it's all just garbage. All these people love their crystals and do all this fancy stuff, and I just went, oh, so I don't get this, right? Now, totally get it. Crystals are amazing. Absolutely amazing. So, fact, crystals resonate at a certain frequency if they're tuned. So for your viewers that might not know this, the early CB radios, they literally had a crystal in them in a little metal case with 2 pins. It's just a piece of metal on either side of a piece of quartz that was ground down until it got 27.045 megahertz or something like that. And they write the number on there and you plugged it into your radio and you worked on 27.045 megahertz. Crystals resonate at frequencies, period, right? The technology is in everybody's phones, TVs, microwave, house. Crystals are absolutely everywhere. So let's not write that off as voodoo. What I did was look into various things that crystals can do. So when you compress a crystal on what they call the C-axis, for example, which is the line that it grows in, you make serious amount of electricity, the piezoelectric effect. There's about another 15 effects that crystals do. I used to think it's just one, piezoelectric. There's way more to this, right? And I'm going somewhere with this in a minute, so bear with me. But the cigarette lighters that have the spark, for those of your viewers that don't know this, there's a 1.2 millimeter quartz crystal in there, or sometimes it's zirconia. There's a little hammer in the spring, and it makes like 10 or 15,000 volts. And it does it forever. They don't go flat. They don't need batteries. That's mind-blowingly amazing, right?
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean? So
Yeah.
in your body, your teeth are actually made out of hydroxyapatite, and it's a crystal. And when you chew, you are creating a piezoelectric effect in your mouth, for example. Your bones do this. And I worked in orthopedics in a few different locations, and we were doing research on the healing of bones. And when you stress a bone, the bottom part of the bone, for example, is in compression, and the top part is in tension. And that generates a piezoelectric effect inside the human body. And we now know, this is just the last handful of years, right? We now know that you can accelerate bone healing using the power of crystals, because the bone itself is a crystal.
Yeah.
Do you see where I'm trying to link what sounds like voodoo garbage?
Yeah.
It's not. There's real science behind this.
Yeah. We could talk about that for a long time. And maybe we're going to have to do so many more episodes.
Well, but it's interesting, and all I'm trying to do is stick to things that, when I look up like now and I'm thinking, what can your viewers actually search online to find for themselves to verify what I'm saying?
Yeah, so that it doesn't...
If that makes sense.
So that you're not undermined by the you're a crazy person.
They don't need to trust
title.
my opinion. I'm saying if you feel like it, go and look it up for yourself.
Yep.
You'll find out that it's well studied.
Okay. Well, I've got so much more I want to ask you. We haven't even touched on... Did you want to take the time to talk about your adventuring and photography, or do we save that for another one?
We'll tone it down to I love adventures and I love photography.
Yeah, okay. Because we can tie in all of the bush medicine. I mean, you've got photos and footage and all the bush medicine that you did, these great adventures into the bush where you just survived with nothing,
Particularly, up in Arnhem Land, the Aborigines up there would take me out every chance we had. And there were times when I'd have 5 or 6 people sitting on the roof rack of the cruiser, 2 on each side on the side step hanging onto the roof rack, 1 on the back, and another 5 people in the car. And we'd all go out bush and cook up a feast. And I'd pull out my fishing rod and all these fancy lures to catch a fish. And the bloke next to me's got 3 or 4 before I've caught anything on a piece of string.
Yeah.
Wow. I don't know how they do it, right? But I was so honoured to be taught their natural medicine. And I went out there with Australian Geographic. Now, we didn't end up publishing the feature article that we were doing at the time because there were issues with copyright and stuff like that. And I said that I will not break the free will of the guys that taught me the knowledge. So in Arnhem Land, it's a privilege to be taught the knowledge, and they say you must use this knowledge to help somebody. The exact words they said to me were, it's for somebody walking through this country traditionally. If they're hurt, then the knowledge is to help them. It is not to be for commercial value.
Yeah.
Now, I said to them, if you want this to be commercial value, let me know. I'll put you in contact with the right guys, right? And they said no. And to me, that blew me away because that's pure knowledge. And the pharmaceutical companies, they can't get this knowledge because the Aborigines won't tell them.
Yeah.
Right? They taught me, I can tell you, I went out there hundreds and hundreds of times, right? And there was a time when we were up there with Australian Geographic, and all this is documented. I can send you pictures if you want to. The guys won't mind. They won't mind if I use the pictures, right?
If this helps, by the way, for anyone listening, when I said I hold Damo in high regard because he excels at everything he does, you started photography as a hobby when we lived together.
That's right, I did.
And now he's telling you that he's going out with Australian Geographic to do all this photography stuff because his work was so amazing. They've gone, we need to publish this guy in our magazine. That he was doing as a hobby, not as a photographer.
Well, it ended up getting into something even more interesting. And like I said, we never put that feature article in there. However, on that trip, one example. We just went all around bush wherever the guys took me, and we documented it, right? Just for the purpose of the story. At least 60 or 70 different things. Mostly I was just driving along with the window down, and when I saw a particular plant, I'd just pull over and we'd get out and I'd show them. It was just all day, every day. One of them was a mouthwash anesthetic made from the inner cambium layer bark on a tree. And this blew my mind. And it's one thing that I can send you photos if you want to see it, right? So, old mate, his name was Trevor. Clever Trevor took us out bush, and we're driving around for miles trying to find this tree. And I'm thinking, we're never going to find this tree. And I didn't know what trees I was looking at, right? Bush tucker and stuff, yeah, but trees, never really learnt it at that time. And he said, there's one. Go and have a look at that one. So we go over there and have a look, and he go, nah, he's too old. Keep going. So we drive for another 20 k's, and he said it had to be a young tree near water. I'll never forget this. He narrowed it right down, and sooner or later we found a young tree near water that was the exact right tree. And we pulled out the knife, and he says shave through the bark very carefully until it changes colour, and then take some of that off. We then took that back, and to expedite the process, we just boil it up in some water in a billy can. And he said, I'll never forget this, he said, heat it up until it changes colour. And I'm going, here we go. I was just thinking, really? It's going to go from clear to bright red, like that. Yeah, it did. Actually, it did. And that's like a litmus indication. His knowledge blew me away. So we warmed it up, and all of a sudden it just went red. And he goes, take it off now. It's finished. So it was some chemical process that the Aborigines had known for thousands of years. And I was thinking, well, where'd you get your billy can from thousands of years ago, right? They had other ways of doing this. They knew to use fire and stuff like that. They knew to activate the chemistry. We put it in an old Coke bottle, and we sat down whilst we were fishing for barramundi and swigged it out. And he goes, here you go, you go first. So you just rinse it out in your mouth as an anaesthetic mouthwash. He said if you've got a crooked tooth or something out bush, right, this takes away the pain for you. And I'm like, no, you go first. He goes, no, you go first. And I'm like, no, you're the honourable guest, you go first. So he did some first, and I swashed it in my mouth for about 5-10 seconds, and my entire mouth went numb. Yep. Now, I've done this many times with local anaesthetic. It's handy if you've got a really sore throat, you put a bit of anaesthetic in your hot tea and gargle it. Magic, right? This stuff worked equally as good as lignocaine or something like that. This is an example of bush medicine that has never been published. So we didn't publish that article I said to you 3 times, right? There were copyright reasons why the Aborigines didn't want to do that, and I respected their wishes. It actually upset a lot of people.
That it didn't get published?
Yeah. And I said, I'm sorry, they don't want that particular thing published, so we can't do that. Right? So they said, no, the knowledge is not to impress people. I think it's impressive. I think it's absolutely amazing.
Absolutely.
But you can see the line of respect in what they were happy to teach me, because they knew I wasn't going to screw them over or anything like that. But they don't trust white people because they're always out there looking for the next greatest drug to go take back to the lab and then make a synthetic copy of it and patent it.
Yeah.
You see, you can't patent a natural substance.
Mm-hmm.
And I will never forget the stuff that they taught me up there for years and years and years, and how good they are at healing certain ailments. And very little of this is published. I've actually read every single book on Australian Aboriginal medicine that's ever been published. I've got all of them at home. And most of what these guys taught me, I'm going to say 90% of what they taught me doesn't appear in any book anywhere.
Yeah.
That's mind-blowing. And the other thing too is, it's being a doctor, it's even more interesting to hear what they've got to say. You know, like the colour change to red, for example. I get the chemistry behind that. And I'm like, wow, you don't know the molecule thing and you don't care, but you actually know exactly what to do. That's mind-blowing. So and I could give you stories until the cows come home about natural things that I have been privileged enough to see and have been taught, and I can see an untapped area in modern medicine. And in fact, I'll personally guarantee you that things will change slowly over time. It's better to use something natural, provided you're not being stupid and you've got the expertise of oversight, because you can very easily do something dangerous. So I would never recommend anyone goes out in their garden and start playing around with stuff. It's just dumb. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, don't get a knife and scrape the tree off your gum tree and then put it in your mouth and go, oh, my mouth is fixed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, how
There's
would you
more to
like
it than that.
somebody to take to your beautiful brand new car parked over there, and I buy them a toolbox for Christmas and say, go and pull Zach's car apart, right? That's not going to be funny, is it? Because they don't actually know what they're doing.
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean? Healing is similar to this. It's very, very simple, but there are lots of bog holes, and rocks to trip over along the way. And that's where conventional medicine, these guys are really, really good at that. Do you see what I mean? So my dream is to bridge the two somehow one day. Lawfully, legally, practically, without harm. That's my dream.
Well, hopefully you can do that and be, say, the pioneer for that. Once you've created the model that works, all of those other doctors that you already talked about, you can go, guys, you don't need to be, because as we know, the tip of the spear is the one that cops the most flack, right? The person who goes first has the hardest time, but you can then share what you've learnt and created with others so they can now come behind you, and it then spreads from there. So hopefully that's what you can achieve. So, leads me to my question. What then makes you hopeful for the future? Whether that be 5 years, 10 years, however long you want the future to be, based on what we've talked about and what you're trying to achieve, what makes you hopeful for the future?
Well, I'm actually not even hopeful. And we briefly talked about this. I know it's going to change. I can already see it. So, to me, hope is for those that can't yet see it, because that's the first step, isn't it? And then when you know it's changing, then it's a different kind of hope, if that makes sense. I can already see the changes. And the most amazing catalyst in this is that more and more and more and more people, not everybody, but more and more people are understanding the significance of nature. They forget that their body is natural. We came from nature, right? We now look down on Mother Earth, or whatever you want to call it, and natural things as just being something that was always there. No. That's actually where we came from. And when we become over-synthetic, we lose our connection with nature. And I can't think of too many examples of where that's good for you, when you overdo it. Whenever you get too far away from nature, you tend to have some kind of problem, even if it's depression. They've done countless studies on this over the years, the military and whatnot. They bury people in a building underground and see how they react and study psychology and stuff. Do you know, when astronauts go into space, they need to simulate the Schumann resonance. So the Schumann resonance has typically been 7.83 hertz. It's changing at the moment, but it's a 7.83 hertz frequency that the Earth itself resonates at. You can measure it, right? There's a lot of other frequency noise, but you can measure the Schumann resonance. You can look it up online. There's zillions of pages about it. Back in the day, I was told, so I'm not going to say this is first-hand knowledge, but I was told that the early astronauts got very sick in space, and they had mental disorientation, and they couldn't quite figure out what it was. And it turned out to be the fact that they'd left the vibrating harmonic frequency of the Earth, and it made them sick. You know what they did? They made a machine to simulate 7.83 hertz, plugged it in, and they were fine after that. Now, isn't that an interesting story if it's true, right?
Sure.
I could give you many more stories, but what I'm saying is people, when they're in nature, don't even realize that they're harmonizing in some way with an actual frequency. Remember I said, hear the bird, the whip bird? When you measure these frequencies and the harmonics, there is a mathematical pattern to it, and it is natural. that same pattern predicts the location of the planets in our solar system. I know how to mathematically predict where they're going to be, and I've never read anything on it, but I know they sit in these harmonic nodes as they orbit the sun. So these principles that I'm talking about, they apply to large bodies floating around in space. They also apply at the molecular level. Do you see what I mean?
Yep.
So when you look at, say, water, 2 hydrogens and an oxygen, they're in a harmonic balance. When you get the frequencies, you can start to make certain predictions. So I know if the water, if you think of an oxygen and 2 hydrogens, if you think of that angle, I know that that angle is typically 104.5 degrees, right? When you stretch it out a little bit to 106, 107, it changes the properties of the water. So, for example, conventional doctors are taught water's just water. No, it is not. It is not. The angle alone changes the properties of it. And actually, sometimes the length of that bond changes it as well. And it has been studied with things that, you know, they'll stick a little machine in there and pull the water up, you know, like a piece of snot coming up. Sorry. It's that surface tension wants to stick to it, right? What even is surface tension? Really? What is it? Okay, it's a liquid crystal. That's what I'm trying to tell you.
And if people want to know more about this, you did an episode with Jane.
Oh, Jane 108. Yeah. We did a brief chat on it.
So if people want to know a little bit more than what we can talk about in the next 5 minutes, go look up, what's Jane 108?
Jane 108.
Yeah.
I guess what I'm waffling on about is the fact that, yeah, I thought it was voodoo. So I would never criticize anyone that doesn't get this, but if they want to learn about it, my approach is to scientifically understand it. And I'm happy to sit down with somebody and explain it to them and say, hey, prove me wrong, right? Go and check it for yourself. I know what I'm talking about in this area. So I can see the gap between conventional medicine and modern health solutions that I'm telling you are going to come out in due course. People are talking about it all around the world right now, and it's very exciting. So that's my hope, Zach.
Well, I'm glad, as you said, that it goes from hope to truth. It's a truth that you know is coming, and that
Yep.
I am trying to provide hope for people that feel lost in the world through this podcast. It makes me excited that you know that what you're talking about is coming, because I think what you're talking about is great. And I hope that more people find this truth that you have as well.
Yep. I'll give you some hope. You're going to see the changes in the next 5 years.
Awesome.
Quote me on it, Zach.
Well, this is going to be up forever.
Quote me on it.
So people can come back in 5 years' time.
There's going to be some wild times, but remember, it's both. There's wild times and there's new times. The new times are going to go like this. The wild times are going to go down like that, right? X point.
But it's going to be good.
It's going to be 5 years. It's not even that long. It'll be over in the blink of an eyelid. You'll be a grandfather by then, Zach.
Well, let's talk again before 5 years is up. Thank you so much for your time, Damo.
Thank you, mate.
Speak again soon.
Thank you.